Hello, my fellow denizens from the dark side of YouTube. I welcome thee with the start of the new year 2024 and wish you all the best in the coming months. The following scary stories in this video are pulled straight out from none other but from the deep and cavernous bowels of Ni-chan, otherwise known as 2chan, a Japanese version of 4chan. But of course, before we begin, an obligatory disclaimer is in order. The following stories were labeled as true, but were also found in the creepypasta section, so they may or may not be true. But let's be real, all of this is little more than a conjecture and a bunch of lies strung together to make up a story. One which also contains the elements of supernatural and ghostly variety. Ooh. Thus, viewer discretion is very much advised. Now with that said, on with the first story. First story of tonight. The strange taxi passenger I've met in Tokyo. In the neon-lit streets of Tokyo, where the city's heartbeat pulsed through its sprawling maze, I, Hideki, found myself maneuvering my taxi through the fog-drenched lanes. My taxi had seen countless nights like this, but tonight felt different, as if the city held its breath in anticipation of something. Of what precisely, I did not know. Just as the midnight hour of the graveyard shift had chimed, a ride request pinged on my dashboard, guiding me to the district in the old town. The location was familiar for a seasoned taxi driver such as myself, of course. Under the soft luminescence of a street lamp, a figure awaited. A woman draped in an office lady outfit, pencil skirt, high heel stockings and grey-colored jacket. Typical outfit of a banker, secretary or an all-around office lady. Better question, what on earth is she doing here at this hour? Then again, she's a paying customer, and I take what I can get, especially in this economy. I remember thinking something along the lines as I stopped the car and opened the back door for her to get in. Silently she entered my car, her face concealed by the darkness of the night, together with her long black hair. I remember thinking to myself that it would be a good idea to install a lamp or something in my taxi, so that there would be some visibility inside the car interior during the dark and gloomy late night hours. As I pulled away, I noticed something unsettling. Her reflection was absent from my rearview mirror. Naturally, I was perplexed. Maybe the mirror angle was off. As I briefly for a second turned my head back, I saw the lady sitting in the back seat, her head turned to the side, looking through the window. She looked somewhat melancholic. Good thing I checked myself, I thought. Suppressing my unease, I inquired, "Where to?" Her voice, barely above a whisper, replied, "Take me to the place of our parting." "And where's that exactly?" I asked, somewhat annoyed. You see, the vague and uncertain directions from customers are the single most annoying thing in this line of work. Other than that, I love being a taxi driver. Very relaxing. You should try it sometime. The woman then specified the directions. "I can't hear you," I said, because her whispering under the nose was nearly unintelligible. I said you should take me to the cemetery. I was somewhat startled by the sudden loudness of her voice. Gomen nasai. The lady apologized. I gomen aside and apologized too, and nodded in agreement, and began driving. I sure hope you're not a delinquent who plans to do something shady in the cemetery, I mumbled under my nose while steering the car into the nearby street. Driving through the dark city, the silence within my car grew palpable. Her occasional sighs seemed to suggest that the lady was clearly in distress about something, but I couldn't figure out a good way to inquire about it. Then again, I'm a taxi driver, not a psychologist. That was part of the reason why I didn't feel like prying into other people's private business. We soon arrived at our destination, an aged cemetery, its gravestones standing like silent sentinels in the fog. Stop here, she instructed, her voice tinged with melancholy. As I watched her open the door and vanishing into the mist-shrouded graveyard, a sense of foreboding washed over me. Shadows seemed to come alive, and the ghostly luminescence bathed the tombstones. My heart raced as I saw her standing by the weathered gravestone, her form glowing eerily in the spectral light. Facing me once more, her visage bore an expression of a timeless sorrow. I waited, she murmured, her voice hauntingly carried by the wind, for a promise unfulfilled. Huh? What promise? I didn't understand the thing she was saying. Hey! The woman ignored me and just walked a few steps away from the gravestone and simply disappeared into the thin air. It was then that a chilling realization dawned upon me. Whoever this person was, she didn't pay me a single yen for the ride. More to the point, who was she? Was she even real? The thoughts of uncertainty raced inside my head as I tried to comprehend this strange situation. After idling there for a moment or two, I shifted the gear and drove my car to the nearby vending machine, where I inserted a few coins of yen with great haste so I could calm my nerves by indulging in a much-needed drink of a strong kind. Those of you who work night shifts and have stressful encounters surely can sympathize with me in this particular situation. In the days that followed, according to my passengers, my taxi became a vessel of memories, carrying passengers who could feel the lingering presence of a love that defied the bounds of mortality. Or maybe it is simply that the holiday season is coming soon. I think I need another drink. Well then, that was quite the story, wasn't it? I suppose one of the downsides of having ghastly apparitions as passengers in your taxi is that they tend to leave suddenly and without payment, huh? And it's not like you have anyone to complain about it neither. But maybe that's the price the ghosts require to leave you in peace. Which brings us to our next story, one where the main protagonist was not so lucky. This next story is called The Haunted Tree at the Outskirts of Our Village. In a remote village nestled among the misty peaks of Gjuilin The legend of the Whispering Willow was passed down through generations. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about an ancient willow tree said to be inhabited by a vengeful spirit. What kind of vengeful spirit, you may ask? Well, let's find out. Once upon a time, in China, some believe around the year 1003, in a village nested amongst the beautiful and misty mountain peaks of Guilin province, lived a beautiful maiden named Li Ling, who was betrothed to the village chief's son. However, as it often happens, a love triangle came to be. Another youth had a huge crush on Li Ling, and after failing to convince her to marry him instead, it all ended with the murder of Li Ling just a couple of days before her wedding was to take place. This terrible tragedy took place in, you guessed it, near the willow tree, where supposedly the spirit of Li Ling is still haunting to this very day. After many years had passed since this tragic event, Chen, a young scholar from Beijing, arrived in the village, eager to study the local folklore for his doctoral thesis. Intrigued by the tales of the Whispering Willow, he decided to spend a night beneath its gnarled branches, hoping to witness the supernatural phenomena firsthand. And to document it, of course. As night fell, the air grew cold, and a soft mist enveloped the village. Chant sat beneath the willow tree, his lantern casting eerie shadows on the ground. Hours passed, and just as he was about to give up, he heard it, a faint whisper, like rustling of leaves, but eerily human. Drawn to the sound, Chen approached the tree, placing his ear against its ancient trunk. The whispers grew louder, and he could make out fragments of a mournful melody sung in a voice that seemed to come from another world. Suddenly the ground trembled, and the willow branches began to thrash wildly. Emerging from the tree's hollow trunk was a spectral figure of Li Ling, her ethereal form glowing in the moonlight. Her eyes, filled with sorrow and rage, locked onto Chen's. "You seek knowledge," she whispered, her voice echoing with centuries of longing. "But some truths are better left buried." Terrified, Chen tried to retreat, but he found himself rooted in the spot. Li Ling's spirit, bound to the willow, sought vengeance on all who dared to disturb her eternal slumber. Chen thrashed against the tree limbs that seemed to suddenly wrap around his hands and feet. What's going on? I can't move. Somebody help me, please. I can't get out. Villagers heard the young scholar's screams and pleadings for mercy, but knew better than to rush to his aid. And thus, after a few moments of haunting screams, there was silence, and only the sound of wind and the usual crickets filled the dark and lonely night. As dawn broke, the villagers found Chen's lifeless body beneath the Whispering Willow, his face frozen in a silent scream. The ancient curse had claimed another victim, a grim reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadowy realms between myth and reality. Supposedly at first, the spirit of Li Ling wished to exact revenge on the man who ended her life. But it appears the man in question knew better than to approach the scene of the crime. Supposedly, after committing the crime, he fled the village and was never heard from again. Realizing that she will probably never be able to get her hands on the man that ended her life, the spirit of Li Ling became vengeful and was said to be haunting the tree ever since and exacting revenge on anyone who was foolish enough to linger around the tree for too long. From that day on, the villagers avoided the haunted tree, leaving offerings of incense and rice wine to appease the vengeful spirit of Li Ling. So far, it seemed to have worked. The whispering willow stood as a silent sentinel, its branches swaying mournfully in the wind, a haunting reminder of a tragedy and a curse that took place many, many years ago. Oof! Another one bites the dust, it seems. It didn't end well for the protagonist of this story. Maybe the next one will fare better. For the next story, we will be going back to the country of the rising sun, where yet another taxi driver had a strange experience, one which he struggled to convey to his friend. This next story is called The Story That My Taxi Driver Friend Told Me While Being Tipsy. This is a story about my neighbor and friend Hiroshi-san, who worked as a taxi driver in Kakegawa, Shizuoka Prefecture. He shared with me this predicament while we were both under the influence. Rather considerably, I might add, since the mugs of beer were refilled and refilled and refilled once more numerous times during our frequent late Friday night visits to the local izakaya. So, take this story with a grain of salt, but at the same time I assure you that everything I'm about to say here is 110% true. If you don't believe me, then know this: I have a bridge to sell, and all you need to do is name your price. At any rate, here is the story that my neighbor and friend Hiroshi-san has shared with me while being considerably inebriated. In the beautiful streets of the city in Japan named Kakegawa, where houses and lights and various signs painted the streets in a myriad of colors, Hiroshi-san, a middle-aged taxi driver, navigated his vehicle through the maze-like roads. Having driven for over 2 decades, he was familiar with almost every nook and cranny of the city. Yet for some ungodly reason tonight felt different. A thick fog enveloped the streets, and an eerie silence replaced the usual cacophony of city sounds. It was past midnight when Hiroshi-san noticed a figure waving for a ride. Dressed in a white kimono with long jet black hair cascading down her back, the woman seemed out of place in the modern city setting. Nevertheless, Hiroshi pulled over, and she entered the back seat without uttering a word. "Where to?" Hiroshi asked, trying to break the uncomfortable silence. She softly replied, "Drive." Without any further instructions, Hiroshi began to drive. The interior of the taxi grew cold, and he could see his breath forming a mist in the rear-view mirror. He stole glances at the woman through the mirror, but she seemed to be lost in her thoughts, staring blankly out the window. The woman kept giving some vague directions, however, and Hiroshi complied. After driving for around half an hour, Hiroshi realized that they were now in the outskirts of town, somewhere in the northern part of Kakegawa, near the mountains. The streets were lined with ancient-looking trees, and the fog had grown denser, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. His anxiety grew, but he dared not to question the passenger. Suddenly, the woman whispered, "Stop here." Hiroshi pulled over to the side, and before he could turn around to ask for payment, he noticed the back seat was empty. Panicking, he stepped out of the taxi, scanning the surroundings with his flashlight. There was no sign of the woman. Confused and scared, he quickly drove away, hoping to leave the eerie place behind. But as days turned into nights, Hiroshi began to experience strange occurrences. Every time he glanced into the rear-view mirror, he would catch a glimpse of the woman's reflection. Shadows would move in his peripheral vision, and he often felt a cold presence beside him, even when the seat was empty. Desperate for answers, Hiroshi consulted an old friend who was a Shinto priest. After hearing the tale, the priest sighed deeply. "You've encountered the Yurei," he whispered, "a vengeful spirit bound to the earthly realm." The priest then performed a cleansing ritual on the taxi vehicle and on Hiroshi-san as well, praying for the spirit of the woman to find peace. The priest also sold a charm to Hiroshi for a meager price of 5,000 yen, of course, insisting that it will ward off the evil spirits as long as he has it hanged inside his vehicle. However, the hauntings persisted. Hiroshi, tormented by the relentless spirit, said screw it and decided to retire early. He sold the taxi, hoping that distancing himself from the vehicle would free him from the ghostly encounters as well. In a stroke of good luck, that actually seemed to do the trick. Hiroshi-san has not been bothered by the supernatural occurrences and or evil spirits since. Now there's probably some young driver who bought Hiroshi's old taxi, unaware of its haunted past. During one of the nights, as he works the graveyard shift while driving through the dark yet pretty streets of Kakegawa City, a woman in a white kimono may wave him down, and so the cycle very likely will continue, with the Yurei seeking company on cold, foggy nights, forever haunting the streets of Kakegawa, and perhaps occasionally even as far as Izu Peninsula. And that's the end of today's show. I hope you enjoyed the stories. It was fun making this video. If you enjoyed listening to my ramblings, please hit the like button, share a comment, or maybe even press the subscribe button. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.